Well, hi folks, this is Ed Thorne and welcome to another edition of Pembroke Today. And today we're going to be talking about the herring run and herring in general and the work of the Herring Fisheries Committee. And with me today are Bill Boulter, selectman, former police chief, and head honcho with the Herring Fisheries Commission, and Art Egerton, who's a new member of the Conservation Commission and the Herring Fisheries Commission as well. So, gentlemen, thanks for being here, and let's talk fish. Bill, you want to explain to the folks out there what the herring run is all about?
Well, I think historically the herring run was made for people to come and enjoy themselves at the park. It is a park there, and quite a few people enjoy that, all year long. Originally, way back, they made a couple of different sleuthways at the park so that the fish gathered up there before they went upstream into the other lakes and ponds, so that the people could see the fish there. The kids used to jump in the water and try to grab them with their hands and all that kind of stuff. And lobstermen used to take the fish in the morning, in the early part of the morning, and usually the superintendent or whatever would be there with a big net and fill up big baskets of herring for the lobstermen so that they could use it for bait. Years before that, the people in the Indians or whatever used to use the herring for, they would plant corn with a seed and a heron, or a part of a heron or whatever.
So actually, the fish were a fertilizer.
They used it as fertilizer. Yep. It's actually used for a lot of different things. There was a lot of heron years ago, and basically they, for whatever reason, there's a lot of different ideas on why they put a moratorium on the fish, because the number of the fish went down and down and down over several years. Originally, Matakeesit was spelled different than it is today, but Matakeesit means a land of many fish, and that's why a lot of people came to Pembroke, and they settled in Pembroke was because of the fish. So, in fact,
I think Bill and Art, my research showed that name that you were talking about was Namakeesit. Namakeesit, which you're right, says place or land of many fish.
Yes.
So, yeah. Anyway, so the Herring Run is basically a park that commemorates the migration of the fish. So, yes. Art, how do the fish migrate, when, and what's the reason for it?
Well, we'll start out in the springtime. They come upriver and end up in the ponds. They go to a number of ponds all over the East Coast, and they get up to the ponds, they lay their eggs, and then go back to the ocean. And at some point, the eggs hatch, and they turn into fish, and the fish stay in the pond until they get a little bit bigger. Some of them start going back down September, October, and there might even still be a few going down now. And then those same fish come back up. They come up 2 or 3 times, the ones that make it. And so it's quite a life to be a herring. Instead of, a bigger fish might come up once and they die at the top, but then the herring just keep going back and forth.
I think salmon are an example of something like that, right? So, now, these fish are called, let me see if I can butcher the pronunciation, andronymus, something like that, if you know what I mean. Now, that means that they live in salt water their whole lives, but they spawn in fresh water.
Yes.
Correct? Is that how it goes?
Yes.
Right. And so, Art, you mentioned that in the spring they come upriver, or excuse me, up. Well, actually, let's explain to the folks that they'll start out in the Atlantic Ocean or Massachusetts Bay, and then they come in through the North River. Yes. Correct? Yeah. And of course, we were on that boat ride a couple of Sundays ago, and so you come up through the North River, and then what happens to the fish? Where do they make a left turn or a right turn or whatever, Bill?
Well, actually, they keep going right up through Pembroke Center, And they hit one ladder that's there off of Habermark Street, and they go into another pond there, and then they go up from there into Furnace Pond, which is another ladder up there, and then they go into another pond that's adjacent to Furnace Pond, and then they go into Oldham Pond. So Furnace Pond and Oldham Pond are pretty much the breeding, where the breeding takes place, and they migrate to those locations to, you know, they have their young.
So when the fish come up the North River, and did they, because the North River is formed in Pembroke, at the confluence of the Indian Head River, which is formed, I believe, somewhere in Hanson and Hanover, and then eventually Pembroke. And then also I think it used to be called the Barker River, but now it's pretty much the Herring Brook and Pudding Brook, and all those little brooks are formed. The fish literally come up the North River and actually make a left turn there in the Great Cedar Swamp, right, Bill? Is that how it works?
Yep.
Some of them do. Some of them go off to Hanover and go up to Indian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
there's actually, there's 5 different runs on the North River. The first one is down near the inlet where we went, and it was pretty choppy that day. There's one down there, and it's called the First Herring Brook. And then as you go up a little bit further, there's a second Herring Brook. So there's several different towns that encompasses. Then there's a third Herring Brook. So it's Situate and Orwell, over into Hanover. It goes up into Pembroke. Right across from Pembroke there's the third Herring Brook. And then it goes up to Indian Head, which they go up there, and there's a ladder at Indian Head, which is the Pembroke-Hanover line. And some go up that way. And then they continue on right up through, and they, like you said, they take a left or whatever and head up into the Cedar Swamp. And they continue up through the Cedar Swamp all the way through into their regular herring run, and then they continue up into the ponds. So it is quite a ways.
One of the interesting things, gentlemen, that I saw and have noticed the years that I worked for the town is that the fish literally have an incredible journey, because once they come into Pembroke, they go under several roads like Barker Street and Mountain Avenue and Mill Street, negotiate at least 2 fish ladders, correct?
Yes.
And then go under, I guess their last passage would be when they go over the last fish ladder at Furnace Pond. Then they either spawn in Furnace or go under Matakeesit Street and end up in Oldham Pond.
Right.
So,
exactly. Yeah.
now, how big are these rascals? How big are the fish that we're talking about?
Well, there's a bunch of different sizes, and there's actually 2 or 3 types of fish, 2 or 3 types of herring that do come up. But there's the regular alewives, which usually come all the way up, and they're the ones that make the long trip. For the past several years, we really haven't seen any real big fish come up. This year, we saw a lot of big fish come up. Most of the ones that we've seen are small, very small fish that are coming up. Yet I think that the work of the current fisheries people that are on there now actually have done a real lot of work on all of the streams, opening up a lot of blockages that have been on the way. Division of Marine Fisheries was working with us extensively on opening these places all up so that the fish could come up in the last couple of years. This year, we went from an average of 30 or 40,000 fish per year to 120,000 fish this year. And it's the first year, I live on Furnace Pond, and this is the first year that I've seen very large fish coming right up at my dock on Furnace Pond. So there was hundreds of them there, which that's the first time I've seen them there.
That's been since I was a little kid that we had this many fish.
Yeah.
So we're talking the size of the fish could be, what, 8 to 10 inches, something like that?
Yeah, and some of them probably a little bit bigger than that. The bigger ones are which amazed me that I haven't seen the big ones, you know, coming up for quite a while. So we actually did an aerial photography view of from Oldham Pond, and we're probably going to publish that at some time in the near future about the actual path of the heron, so that the people in the town will be able to see that. And we did a helicopter tour from Oldham Pond all the way down the whole stream, which Arthur videoed for us, all the way down the whole stream right out to the inlet. And then we did canoe, pontoon boat, and some of the guys put GoPro cameras on their head or chest or whatever, or their small kayaks and stuff, and actually went through pretty much of the whole run. So there's only one small section that we haven't done, and we're hoping to get that done and put that whole thing together so the people will see the aerial view, and they'll also see the view from the lakes or ponds or streams that, you know, that we walk through. So
when they're making this journey, let's say upstream in the spring, any idea about how long it might take for a particular fish to go from the mouth of the North River up to Oldham Pond?
And it's a lot
Anybody
farther
ever
than if
check that out?
yeah,
It's a lot further than if you flew or just walked, because the river goes back and forth.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
like 10 times
yeah.
longer than it should be.
Yeah, we noticed that on our boat trip, that
Yeah.
you could look at something probably 100, 200 yards straight ahead,
yeah.
but you would go about 400 or 500 yards because of the
Yeah.
way the river winds. So
And I think they're very smart. They come in with the tide. So, and that's what we try to do when we're operating on the river, is to work the tide. So, and you'll see a lot of the people that are on the river that know the river and have canoes or kayaks or whatever, will also work the tide. And by working the tide, what I mean is they go with the tide. It helps them up. It's also higher water, so if there was some debris that was in the stream or whatever, on the high water, when the high water comes up, they have an opportunity to go over that. So that's how a lot of the fish have got up. But since we've done a lot of clearing all along the whole way, we've tried to make it a lot easier for them to make it. And it's, I think they come up a ways and they'll rest for a while and, you know, get their breath or whatever, and then they'll go again. And
I don't know, fish breathe,
you know,
but I guess
They wait for their
yeah.
friends to come up and meet them.
yeah, and you'll see them in front of the ladders and all of that, and they're getting the oxygen into their bodies so that they, you know, have enough power and energy or whatever to get right up that, and you'll see them congregating, you know, right near, and you'll see the bubbles in the water and all that. There's a lot of at the particular ladders, they're made for a specific reason to create that, so that they actually can get oxygen. Once they get all that oxygen, you'll see them in pools, you know, right near the ladders. And
Have these ladders always been in place? I mean, I know that this was an invention of man, and I guess before dams were built for grist mills, I think, especially at the Herring Run Park, wasn't that a mill that would grind up, you know, grain or herring or whatever for fertilizer?
That's what I understand. That it was, you know, it was long before my time, but but I believe there was a mill there, and you know, it's they use the water power of the streams to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that I saw that that talked about a decline of herring over the years, especially, you know, during the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s and early 1900s, was that there was a proliferation of a lot of mills on rivers, and that in itself helped, you know, with the decline of herring, because it kind of polluted the streams and whatever, and that led to that. And you were talking about early on about taking of fish and limiting it. And even though the herring were going down, I think one of the reasons that they quoted is saying that there was a decline in the herring population was either overfishing, pollution, or regulations. That our local governments were passing rules and regulations that were not in the best interest of the fish. And therefore, that led to that decline as well. One of the things that I found interesting in my little research was that when the herring come up in the spring, and I don't know if you guys know this or heard of this, that they usually migrate in the daylight hours, and that when they go back in the fall to the ocean, they usually do it at night. Have you ever heard that?
Yes, I have.
I mean, that's a strange thing, but...
Well, actually, you'll find that when we were counting the fish this year, we had a counter, which there's only a few in the state, and we were really lucky that working with the Division of Marine Fisheries, they put a counter in a location along the stream so that we know how many fish are coming up. And when we counted them, you'll find out sometimes that there's a lot of fish that travel at night also. So there isn't any timing mechanism yet to tell us how many fish are going up as to what time they're going up. But we check it between a certain time of the day every day to get the count so that we know what the count is every day. And what we probably need in the future is to have, well, we had 5,000 fish or 7,000 fish come up today, but they mostly did it between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock, or whatever. If it's a sunny, warm, really nice day and the water temperature is up, then they travel usually during that time.
Wow.
So you don't really see a lot of fish when it's cold and when the weather is tough or whatever. You don't really see that. It's in the spring when it's starting to really warm up and all that. Then you'll see them. You'll see them coming up a lot.
Don't they wait till it gets to be a certain temperature and then they just start their run?
Yes. Yep. They usually wait. We have a temperature gauge on each one of the ladders where they do the counting.
Oh, right.
And they take down the temperature of the water every day when they look at that. So, it's kind of an important thing for the biologists and all that at the Division of Marine Fisheries to know all these facts. And there has been some discussion about what time do they actually go, So, I mean, the birds are there. They can tell you when the fish are there.
They know for sure.
If you just watch the birds, they'll tell you,
Yeah, I mean, birds are one of the big predators
Yes.
of the herring, in addition to birds, like other fish, correct?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So it actually helps the whole ecology. I mean, herring are a real important thing for us to keep this run going and to keep the herring coming, because it affects all kinds of things. It's the fish that are in the pond, the bass and the other fish that are in the pond are eating them. You can see it at night when there's tons of juveniles all over the place. The bass are crashing everywhere, feeding on them. And that only makes them bigger and better. When they go downstream, the birds go after them. The bass sit in the rivers waiting for them to come downstream or going upstream, and they feed on them, which they get bigger. Lobstermen use them, whatever, but not now because there's a moratorium on them. But they use a different type of herring, a fish that is offshore more than inshore. The alewife and them are more of a close proximity to the shoreline than the ocean herring that are further out.
And they also feed fish in the ocean when they're back out there.
Right, they feed fish in the ocean when they go back out there. The tuna fish love them. The bluefish love them. I mean, it's, there's a lot of different fish that go after them. So if there isn't any, then, it's kind of funny because probably for the last 8 or 9 years, there hasn't been a lot of tuna fish inside the bay because there hasn't been a lot of bait fish. And now that there was a big influx of herring this year, all up and down the coast and a lot of the different runs, there was a lot of tuna out in the bay this year.
Oh, okay.
So that hasn't happened in quite a while. So
We have a lot more birds in Pembroke, I think, than we have in the past, too. There's a number of reasons, but the herring is certainly a big part of that.
yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. The what in the past herring were used for obviously food and for fertilizer, which is something a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Right now, what value do they have currently? The herring. You mentioned a little bit ago about bait for big fish.
Yeah, the herring that are out in the sea, you know, that are out in the sea, they actually migrate differently. Some of them will come in and they'll drop their eggs in the river or in the stream rather than go into ponds. You know, and the bigger ones. So they don't come all the way up, you know, into the lakes and drop their eggs. So they'll do it in the river or in a larger stream. But most of those will stay out at sea. You know, until they come in to do some.
One of the things the cranberry companies do, which we don't really have in Pembroke anymore, they used to use them for fertilizer, and they would cover the bogs with them. So you wonder where 100,000 fish went. It could be out there.
When we're talking about the migration of the fish, and we were talking earlier about that they actually move a lot more freely when the temperature starts to go up.
Yeah.
So is it sufficient to say that if we have a very cold winter, that the migration of the fish would be delayed?
Yes.
By a couple weeks or a month or whatever?
And the fish will actually, the juveniles now that are leaving, they'll go out to sea for 3 years, approximately 3 years, before they come back to to find where they were born or whatever, and drop their eggs and stuff in the. So they're out. They're gone for 3 years, and then they keep coming back after that until they just can't make the trip anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of people don't know that they don't do this every year. That's always a different batch of fish doing the trip up and down the river.
Right.
That they're out there for 3 years or so.
How do they know?
It is amazing.
I don't know. They don't have GPS, and they leave here and go up to Canada and go all the way down to Florida and all that. Who knows exactly where they are? I mean, that's where they would go from when they leave here. They could go up to Nova Scotia or go all the way down to Florida, and then 3 years later find their way back here. And I mean, I have GPS and I get lost sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't been on the river. It's amazing that they get around the way they do.
Yeah.
And there's always been some kind of supervision in town. Town government's always been involved in the taking of fish and the regulating of fish. And and records show that there's been always a herring superintendent and what have you. But in '98, the Board of Selectmen created the Herring Fisheries Commission. And you gentlemen are currently on the board right now. And I think there were some things that they were charged with in '98. For instance, one of the duties was to maintain the waterways. Give me a quick synopsis of what you folks have been doing lately to ensure that the herring run and related waterways are clear for the fish.
Well, it's probably during their migration. It's a constant thing for all of the members to be checking the runs. We're very happy that Arthur lives right next door to one of them. So he just goes right out his backyard and he can take care of that one. But we try to check the runs as much as we can during migration, which is kind of important. But throughout the year, there's certain times that Division of Marine Fisheries will allow you to go in to the streams and not only for the herring but for trout and stuff like that. That's other fish that are in there that could be spawning and all of that. So we work with the Division of Marine Fisheries to find out exactly what is the best time for that. So they would tell us that they don't want us in the water creating a muddy mess and going through the mud and cutting down small trees and all that kind of stuff to make the passage easier for the herring during certain times of the year. So, and that would probably be between April, May, and June. Sometimes maybe at the end of March, and we have to keep an eye on that. So, and then there's usually 3 months after the summer, September, October, November. We've seen fish that have been close to Thanksgiving that have actually still going down. They're still migrating down. So it depends how strong they are and how they feel, I guess, of when they want to migrate. So
another thing that was charged to the commission back in '98 was that they would be involved with the Massachusetts State Stocking Program. We're not really concerned right now with stocking fish in the herring run. I mean, I'm sure that must have been a concern some time ago, but I don't think we haven't been involved in any kind of program like that lately, have we?
Not lately, no, but they did several years ago. They did bring in several thousand fish, and the prior committee did work very hard, getting those fish up into above the dam, especially when one of the dams was broken. The Division of Marine Fisheries came in and fixed it, put a whole new dam in and put in a whole new ladder. And the new ladder is actually scientifically made or whatever, or engineered made. So
they're pretty expensive, a couple $100,000, right?
So that the way the water goes through and the fins that are made inside of the structure actually create a hole in the middle of the water that's going down that helps the fish swim right up the middle. So it's the water hits the fins, turns the water back again, and it creates so much disturbance there that it actually makes a run right up the middle for them. So it makes it a lot easier.
It's more of an escalator than a ladder. So they just sit there and get pulled up.
The old ways we actually went through the woods and saw some of the old runs that are in between Mountain Avenue and Hobbamock Street. There used to be a lot of old runs in there, and years ago a lot of the people used to go in and take the herring out of there in the middle of the night.
Right. Well, well, gentlemen, this has been very informative, and I think probably we've got information and enough material to maybe bring you back and talk about some of the things that the Fisheries Commission is going to be doing in the future, and some of the projects that the town's doing, including the Furnace Pond dredging project, which will do a lot towards restore the habitat for the fish in Oldham Pond. So, well, folks, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed today's program, and I enjoyed having Art Egerton and Bill Boulter with us to talk about the herring and its history in Pembroke and its future as well. So thanks for watching.